Okay, so now we begin with Arrow's possibility theorem. So Arrow's possibility theorem defined an ideal social welfare function to fulfill five criteria. The first one being universalism, which means it should be applied over all individuals in the society. So all individuals in society. Second is Pareto efficiency, which is social welfare function must be based on Pareto efficient criteria. The third one is absence of irrelevant variables, which means that social choice shouldn't be affected by irrelevant variables. So social choice not to be affected by irrelevant variables. Fourth is the choice should be democratic. That is, if all individuals prefer A over B, then society should prefer A over B. Fifth is there should be ordinality. That is, if each individual's utility fulfills RTC, which was the main criteria's axioms of rationality, transitivity, reflexivity, completeness, then social welfare function should also fulfill the RTC principle. So if individual utility fulfills RTC, then social welfare function should also fulfill RTC. So, according to Arrow, it is impossible to have a social welfare function which fulfills all these criteria in a democratic society. So, Arrow clearly said that all these criteria cannot be in a democratic society. So, let's move on to aggregate voting paradox. So, it says, let's say there are three people, three bundles. Now let's start ranking them. So A, B, C ranks are here 1, 2, 3. So let's say A ranks X, Y, Z. B ranks Y, Z, and X. C ranks something like Z, X, and Y. Now aggregate voting would simply say that for A, X is preferred over Y, strictly preferred over Y. For B, Y is strictly preferred over X. For C, X is strictly preferred over Y. Yeah, so X won and got 2 points, while Y got 1 point. Hence, X is strictly preferred over Y. Now, with aggregate voting, we move on and we also deduce that Y is preferred over Z for A, for in B, Y is preferred over Z for C, here Z is preferred over Y. So aggregate voting winner is Y strictly preferred over Z. Through transitivity, we can deduce that X is strictly preferred over Y, Y is strictly preferred over Z. But through aggregate voting, if we look back at the data, so through transitivity, we get this. But now we move on to the third aggregate voting where X is strictly preferred over Z for A. For B, Z is strictly preferred over X. And for C, Z is strictly preferred over X. This gives Z strictly preferred over X. This shows societal welfare is not transitive. This can lead to agenda manipulation. Now, since both of them can't be true at the same time because they would violate transitivity, we can say that this can lead to agenda manipulation. Now we move on to rank order voting. So this was aggregate voting. Now we move on to rank order voting. So similarly, A and B, we have ranks 1, 2, and 3. Let's say A chooses X, Y, Z, and B chooses Y, Z, X. So introduction of Z, the irrelevant variable for agenda manipulation by B, so that Y wins. In this particular case, Z is an clearly irrelevant variable which is introduced by in B so that Y wins this. So Amartya Sen criticized and it and he said that if a country has grassroots democracy, that is, citizens are fully informed and people have well behaved preferences, then it is not possible to have dictatorship. So he said that if a country has grassroots democracy, and people have well behaved preferences, then it is not possible to have dictatorship. Arrow showed paradox of voting with two examples. First is rank order voting. So first is rank order voting. So assuming A, B, C have RTC preferences, society's preference should also be RTC. However, if we see this one right here, it can be shown that social preferences are not transitive. Society prefer X over Y over Z, and Z over X through aggregate voting. Therefore, it results in violation of transitivity according to Arrow that can result in voting paradox. This can happen due to agenda manipulation. For example, under aggregate voting, A can manipulate the agenda by first assuring voting between Y and Z and then comparing the winning bundle to X. A will know all along that Y will eliminate Z and X will, which is A's first choice, can eliminate Y. Similarly, B can try manipulating first voting between X and Z, and C can try manipulating by comparing X and Y. Therefore, Arrow suggested that if social welfare function doesn't follow ordinality, then voting paradox will emerge under aggregate voting. So, Arrow suggested that if social welfare function doesn't follow ordinality, then voting paradox, which is basically agenda manipulation, will emerge under aggregate voting. The second thing which Arrow said as the as he was showing paradox of voting was that voting paradox remained with agenda manipulation so that there will still be manipulation in the economy. Arrow showed it by following table. This one right here. Yeah. Arrow showed that under rank order voting, A and B can rank X, Y, and Z. A ranks X as highest bundle, while B ranks Y as highest bundle. B can manipulate the agenda by introducing irrelevant variable Z and assuring that Z gets second place by B. A gives third rank to Z, Y winning rank. Order voting with higher ranks. Therefore, Arrow suggested that a social welfare function which violates any of these conditions keeping other conditions intact can be constructed. He suggested that the condition of no irrelevant variables can be dropped with least possible loss to analysis. So he said that if a social welfare function violates any of these conditions, keeping other conditions intact, then this whole can be constructed, paradox of voting can be constructed. He suggested that condition of no irrelevant variable can be dropped with least possible loss to analysis. Now we move on to asymmetric information. It is also part of game theory. So with asymmetric information, there comes a lot of things like Stiglitz curve and all this. So let's go into it. So first of all, let's establish some few principles. Pi is area of significance. So there is credibility according to which pi becomes zero. Credibility basically assumes everything is true. No credulous या highest skepticism means alpha is 100, which means everything is false. So then we have market for used cars. This is a classic case study. Then we have lemon and plum. So first is lemon. Lemon means bad quality used cars. Plum means good quality used cars. So now this was given by George Ackroff. Consumers' willingness to pay for lemon, which is bad quality used car, is $1,000, and for plum it is $1,800. So let's see from perspective of producer and buyer, buyer and producer. And let's say we have lemon and plum. So buyer would pay $1,000, $1,800. Producer will get $800 and $1,600. This is willingness to charge, and this is willingness to pay. If consumer chooses to pay an average of the two willingness to pay due to asymmetric information, it will be $1,000 plus $1,800 divided by 2, which is equals to $1,400. Now, just remember this is because of the asymmetric information. Producer knows which cars are lemon and which are plum. So 1,400 comes the average value which will be paid by the buyer. Now let's talk about thin markets. Thin markets are very small markets. Let me draw a Stiglitz curve first. This is demand curve and this is supply curve. This point is E1. Here is price. Here is quality, sorry, quantity. This is Q1 star. So Akrov provided a model on asymmetric information through the problem of lemons. If a market has 50% lemons and 50% plums such that buyers are willing to pay $1,000 for lemon and $1,800 for plums, while sellers are willing to charge $800 for lemon and $1,600 for plums, then if buyer fixed the price taking expected average value at 1400, then it will result in driving out seller of plums from market. This is the problem of adverse selection. So I think Stiglitz curve was not necessary in this, but yeah. So this will lead to sellers getting out of plum cars. If buyer fixed the price taking expected value at 1400, then it will result in driving out sellers of plums from market. This is the problem of adverse selection, which is hidden intention of sellers. Average pricing by buyer has adversely selected lemon sellers and driven out plum sellers. Therefore, the market will have only lemon sellers, and gradually buyers will realize that they are buying only lemons, and the market starts shrinking till there are very few participants left in the market, like this. Here, the Stiglitz curve would be useful. So, the demand for the quality just is very high. People are willing to pay higher price for quality, but there is not much supply of that lemon of the plum quality cars. This figure shows that supply is upward sloping as higher quality will require higher cost of production. Demand curve is backward bending because the buyers are assuming that they will be willing to pay more up to a given level of quality, but after that level, they assume that rise in price is disproportionate to rise in quality, and therefore their willingness to pay declines. That is, they will show aversion to purchasing the commodity. The equilibrium takes place at E1 with quantity Q1 star because the consumer do not trust the market in the backward bending portion of demand curve. It creates a thin market with only OQ1 star units traded in the market. According to Stiglitz, such a market will collapse relatively sooner. Now we'll move on to moral hazard. Okay, so moral hazard is basically described as hidden observation problem because it arises due to inability of an agent to be able to observe all actions taken by another agent. So here buyers are not able to know what sellers are doing. So this is moral hazard. This is a problem with asymmetric information. This problem can be observed in various markets like insurance market, labor market. For example, if an individual takes fire insurance, then it is possible that a person becomes careless and regarding his fire safety, which leads to a fire accident. The insurance company has no method to verify the action, which results in moral hazard. So the first problem was adverse selection. Second is moral hazard in uh, insurance and labor markets. The same problem can be observed in labor market if workers are empl- employed to work in a field for a given daily wage. If may not be possible for landowners to observe all the workers at all point of time, especially with respect to efforts put in. It is observed in Indian market in case of farm loan waivers, under which farmers get a perverse incentive of not paying the loan in the expectation that finally loan will be waived off. Therefore, so example, farm loan waiver. Therefore, presence of moral hazard can create inefficient results where farmer who could have paid the loans also end up not paying it. Now, solutions to the problem of asymmetric information. So, just a recap, the first problem was adverse selection, which is only OQ1 quantity will be traded in the market because at some point buyers would think that they are being charged disproportionately for the quality. Hence, they won't be purchasing at higher prices and demand curve will be backward bending. Also, here there is a market where the after expected value of price just makes it more evident that the plum market, which is the good car market, is completely finished, and then there is very less availability of the plum cars and more availability of lemon cars. So this will be adverse selection. And second is moral hazard, which we just did. So solutions are first is signaling, second is screening. Signaling basically means so it is similar to educational degrees, can also be treated as a method of signaling to the market regarding efficiency of worker. So educational degrees in labor market can signal. Second is screening. This is actual risk analysis by insurance companies can also be used in provision of government policies like considering expenditure amount or position of head of family to determine poverty for provision of subsidy. Third solution is legal contract evaluation. That is, example is taking deposit guarantee or third party insurance. Third party insurance from contractors in case of public projects. So security receipts are example of third party insurance companies. And now then we will move to economies of scale.